Hello and welcome to Hidden Existence, and it is of course anything goes. And I've got with me my co-host Jason McLean. How you doing, Jason?
Oh, so far so good. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm awake. I'm here. Breathing
There you go.
It's a
and
plus.
joining us. Yeah, it is. It's a bonus. The heart's beating, so it's good. And joining us tonight is it
You're funny.
Mogollon Monster?
Are you sure it's not Mongolian monster?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've been
Yeah,
called worse. Daniela,
I'm
it's
sure you
great to
have.
see you again.
and
And
good to see you and have you on tonight.
thank you for
Um,
having me. Jason, great to see you as well.
Yeah, nice seeing you again, man.
You're welcome. So before we start, I don't think I need to warn you guys, but something's been evolving since the swearathon the other week, where it all kicked off in the chat and people were. And so I said, look, I'm going to get the swear jar out.
I
And
forgot my wallet. Hold on.
I'm not sure if I do you use the term kitty over there for like
Yeah, sometimes.
where you might put money into something to.
Mhm.
I don't know if people misunderstood me last night, but they were calling it. No, Jason.
That poor
No,
kitty.
Jason, stop. I know where you're going with Jason. No, but they were calling it. I think they were calling it the kitty swear jar. So look, this is where we're at. Yeah, for this month, right? July, we've got Carl Gotro. Last night, he went. He couldn't stop himself. $100. So
Holy cow!
$10 a swear word. I know my mods and people in the chat will be keeping an eye on you guys and keeping the language clean. I'm sure you will. I mean, I've
Do you take Visa?
yeah, definitely.
PayPal.
I
I still need to PayPal you $10. I still need to PayPal you $10 from last week. Although I still argue that doesn't count because not only is it not really a swear word here, it's not a swear word in Britain. It just means you're getting drunk. Don't even give me that.
Yeah, but we don't just use it for that.
Okay.
We might say PISS off, and that's not a nice word.
Okay, but that's not how that's not what I said. And by the way, we say the same thing, by the way. That's a universal thing.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this as well, because a lot of the words that are classed as swear words, curse words, are actually stuff that we just do, things that we do, don't they, that are just natural. And, but like have you never heard the phrase, oh, I could strangle him, oh, I could kill him, he's late for his dinner. We never get offended when people describe what they want to do to someone. We use those terms so loosely, and yet people don't find that offensive. So it's just a funny way of looking at how people use words.
I'm right there with you. A lot of it's and plus it's like we have this understanding of hyperbolic language, right? We're like, well, we understand that it's hyperbolic. It's not really meant this way, whereas other words are. I think the problem is that they're often designed to shock, right? They're designed for that purpose. Although I like to point out that usually the ones that are offensive versus not offensive are the ones that have a more Anglo-Saxon root versus the French Latin root, because English is basically an amalgamation of a lot of different languages, but primarily French Latin and this sort of Anglo-Saxon Germanic languages. And so, the ones that tend to be more considered offensive are from the Anglo-Saxon, whereas the French are considered, appropriate. Hold on.
Nice.
How do you make his color, by the way?
That wasn't difficult at all, was it? Thank you very much. Feel free to let one out.
Yeah,
your old one. So thank you.
There you go.
Hi, Grassman. Really
so wait, did he actually send cash that way? Is that why? Because it's like orange on my feed. Is that what happened?
This is on a super chat. Actually, I have put a PayPal link. It is in the description. If anyone wants to donate, I'm not asking anyone to donate, but if anyone feels like they want to and contribute towards the channel, do it that way, because YouTube take 30%, I think, of the super chats, and that's quite a lot. That's quite a chunk.
Oh, it is.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
I didn't know you could do that. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I think you might have to get up to a certain amount of subs to switch that on. So
probably.
So where were we at? I'm in
Waxahachie. I think you're in Lancashire. Lancaster?
Lancashire.
Lancashire.
Shire.
Lancashire.
I'm in Arizona.
You're in Arizona. So.
Arizona. Yeah. Oh, literally where are we at? Haha. Okay. So, Russ, you had a question. Someone asked you to ask Jason a question.
Yeah. Knowing that, you're into like the pterodons and stuff and pterodactyls, and she wanted me to ask you about thunderbirds. Mm-hmm. She's from Utah, and I'm guessing it was like 4 years ago. She walked out of her house to take something to the garbage can, and it was like 2:00 in the morning. And as she was walking to the can, she had to cut through her backyard, and she gets almost to the can, and she looks up, and she sees what she described as a huge bird. Mm-hmm. And I mean, huge as in like 30 feet, 30-foot wingspan.
Right.
And she describes it, she just keeps calling it either a hallucination or a vision because something mm-hmm. that big can't exist. Right. But when she saw it, it went out of sight. She ran around the house and saw it again, flying over the neighbor's property and flew away. And she wanted me to ask what your thoughts are on that. Her belief is with the Ute Indians, being from Utah, that it's a vision. They say it symbolizes change. So
right.
That's kind of what she's going with, just because it's kind of hard to believe that would exist.
Okay, so Jamie Cottrell, we're actually going to talk about that here in a little bit because Daniela actually had the same question earlier on.
This came up as well, but I said the comic.
Right, you said the comic, but I mean it's what we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
So aside from marionettes and spaceships, so the entire Thunderbird sort of question is really, again, one of those things that's layered, right? A lot of the things that we're dealing with are exceptionally layered between mythology, theology, the paranormal, and then physical creatures, right? And so the problem is oftentimes trying to segregate out which one's being seen. So first, around the questions, did she say anything about what the bird may have looked like, or was it just a large, or did she just say it's a large bird? Because I hear that all the time.
It was a large bird, feathers. It was 2 a.m., but there was enough moon out. It wasn't full, but it was a bright night.
Right.
And she said it had feathers.
Okay, so not a pterodactyl or anything, but definitely a bird. So yeah, I mean, so here's the thing, right? There are a lot of sightings of these large teratorns, right? Or at least what is believed to have been teratorns. Let's say it that way. Teratorn is just a great example. Now, a teratorn were basically giant, and imagine Andean condor, but with a wingspan the size of a bus.
Three times that.
Yeah, I mean, they're just massive, massive creatures. They are the largest birds that we are at least aware of, true birds that could fly. Now, there's sort of the question of, can they still exist today? You know what? People have seen them forever. You go. The Greeks have the story of what's called the rock, and it's in Syrian and other mythologies as well, but which were just giant eagles, right? I mean, that's all they were. They were just massive, massive eagles. It was ROKs, rocks, right? We've seen, like in the American Indians, they have the legends of the Thunderbird, which is oftentimes described as this massive teratorn-like creature. Even recently, over the last couple hundred years, we have accounts of at least several accounts of these creatures attacking and picking up children. In fact, let me do a little plug for Small Town Monsters. They did one called Terror in the Skies. Honestly, as far as my opinion goes, it's one of the best cryptozoological documentaries ever done, period. Just from an artistic standpoint, at least. And they actually point out, a lot of people are fairly familiar with the child who was assaulted in Illinois in the 70s, right? Where there was two of them. One actually picked the boy up and his mother fought it off, right? But there was another story from like 100 years earlier in the late 1800s where a child was actually in front of a school full of kids and teacher, picked up and full on carried off and never seen again. Yeah. So are there what appear to be something like a teratorn, which is a large predatory bird like a condor? Yeah, I think that we have to say that they do exist. Why don't we see them all the time? That's an excellent question. I don't know. Again, I think it's one of those, that is one of those things where even if they had such a small population that we wouldn't necessarily see them all that often, they're so large you'd expect to see them more often than we do. So it may be that they may be mostly nocturnal, like again, which is when your friend saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the issue, that they're flying at night. Again, small population flying at night, but where are they when they're not being seen? I don't know. So, but then we do. So that's the physical. But does that mean that's what she saw? I don't know. Because even the teratorns that are described usually tend to be smaller than what she's described, like 30 feet. This does seem unusually large. Could be she misjudged the size. If it was flying a little bit lower, that's definitely a thing. However,
it was low. She said it was flying low.
Well, there's also the other possibility that what she saw wasn't purely a physical thing. There are a number of people who've seen things that look like birds, right? Feathers, whole 9 yards, that turn out to be something supernatural in origin. I've heard a number of people who've had visions where supernatural entities we would call probably fallen angels are described as large, dark, almost. They would even describe it as almost a primitive or Paleolithic type bird, right? Like it was something like a dinosaur bird is what they're often described as. Others have described angelic figures as birds as well. But the one story that sticks out the most to me was a woman it was here in Texas. She was driving home, and she was out. It was out in the middle of nowhere. She's driving home. It's her parents' home, and she sees on top of this old water thing, right? The water container. She looks up, and what she sees is what looks like a half man, half bird creature dancing on top of this water tower, surrounded by other very large birds, right? They look like crows, but they were much larger than crows, and they were all dancing. And she stops, and she sees it. All of a sudden, she realizes they're looking at her. So she floors it to try and get out of there as quickly as she can. She even calls her parents and like, "Hey, I need you to have the gate open. I'm coming, and something bad is coming with me. And we need to, please have your guns. I'm going to get there as quickly as I can. Lock the gate. Let's get inside the house as quickly as possible." She eventually gets home, and her family asks her where she's been, because she's like, "What do you mean? It's been 5 minutes." They're like, "You called us 2 hours ago." So lost time. We don't know what the heck this thing is. And one of the stories I have in my new book that's supposed to be coming out this year is the story of the La Lechuza that a person I know personally was assaulted by here in Dallas, in Oak Cliff. The thing came for her. And again, for those who aren't familiar, the story of Lechuza is basically a giant owl with the face of a human woman, right? But she's described looking at this thing like it was, just a few yards from her when it landed in the tree, and her aunt was throwing holy water at it and swearing in Spanish. She would have definitely had owed you a couple of grand, from what I understand. But she was throwing holy water, and so just some minor background. Her aunt was a curandera, which is a Latin American witch doctor, is sort of the way you could look at it, or shamanic practitioner. But they were sort of they were into things similar to Santeria, but not really Santeria, right? Whereas it's a syncretic series of religions. So it's like you had Catholicism mixed with Haitian voodoo, mixed with some other stuff, and that's what she did. So she she turned around and saw it. Her aunt is throwing herbs and holy water things at it, and she saw this thing. She said it was the size of a human with the wingspan to match, but the face was of a woman, but it looked like it had the body of an owl. So all that to say, she clearly saw something, right? The question is could it have been a physical creature that she just happened to have the unique honor to see? That is entirely possible. Could it have been something supernatural? That's also very possible. How do we know the difference? Unfortunately, unless something else sort of occurred at the time, right? Unless she heard something, saw a vision, or felt something else, then I would say it's I would lean more towards it being a physical creature that she saw. Maybe she did see one of these rocks or thunderbirds or whatever you'd like to call them, Teratorns. But again, we can't actually say that it wasn't one of these other supernatural creatures that absolutely have at least some form of bird-like form.
Sure.
I wish you could be more specific, but unfortunately, it sounds to me like it's more of a physical thing, and she's probably okay.
That's the way I was leaning, just because I for some reason I got it in my head that if it was a vision, as soon as it left her sight, it was gone. But she went around the house and saw it continue over the neighbor's property and fade out, fly away.
Right.
So that kind of led me to think that it was more physical.
Yeah, my default tends to be go with physical unless there's something truly unusual that occurs. Creatures of unusual size may seem fantastic, but I mean, look at the Quetzalcoatlus, right? The thing was the size of a freaking giraffe, and it flew. So, I mean, the simple fact of the matter is, there are history is full of these massive animals that seemingly defy imagination, but they absolutely do and did and have, and some still do continue to exist to this day. So I'm sort of a default physical guy, unless there's some reason to say, well, maybe there was something else going on. So, but yeah, I mean, I have no doubt that what she saw was definitely real. What does that mean? Who knows? But I'm leaning physical.
All right. I'm sure she's listening, so thank you for answering that.
Well, you're welcome, Mogollon's friend.
I've just been looking online, actually. There's not many sightings in the UK. Can't find... There's a couple, but...
yeah. Well, I think for the physical ones, like they are... I think one of the reasons we don't see them that often is they are genuinely reliant on air currents, right? So I think they actually can hit that jet stream and they just go anywhere they want, right? But that may also mean that they're sort of, going in a similar pattern maybe around the U.S. I'm of the opinion that a lot of things that used to be very common, say 1,000, 2,000 years ago, a lot of these, what we would consider exotic animals or cryptozoological animals, died off in Europe because of the Maunder minimum, right? The mini ice age. I think they killed a lot of things off. And so the things that survived either by migrating away or they were leftovers from the other locations. And so they're still kind of in, following the areas in that realm. Because we're really just, what a lot of people would be surprised to find out is that we're really still warming up from that time frame, right? Daniela, where you are, the Thames River used to freeze over so completely that elephants, they had these frost fairs in the winter, and like they could bring elephants out on the ice, and they would have these frost fairs. So what's his name? I just forgot his name. There's a diary of someone who claimed to have been at the sacking of the Alamo, right, with Santa Anna. He was for the Mexican army. It's one of the accounts of not Bowie, because Bowie died, but of I just forgot his name. Davy Crockett, saying that he was actually captured and then executed instead of dying at the Alamo. Anyway, one of the things he describes is going through a winter where there was snow, like 2 or 3 feet deep, and he was down around where the border is now. He wasn't much further up than San Angelo, and they were facing this hellacious weather. I mean, simple fact of the matter is, snow does not get that deep that far south. Heck, I'm in Dallas. It almost never snows, and when it does, it's more like a nice little coating of ice for like 2 weeks, and then it's gone. Like it does. We don't. I can remember 2 times when it has snowed that heavily in my entire life, and more often than not, we don't get it. So to see it that far south, I mean, the simple fact of the matter is, we are warming up from a little tiny ice age that we had about 1,000 years ago. We're still recovering from it, and I think that wiped out a lot of creatures. A lot of what we would consider dragons and things like that. So it's entirely possible the reason we don't see them very often in the UK is the ones that did live there have died off, and or they migrated for food. Now they live over here.
We seen a great blue heron gigging frogs the other night. I do love herons. They do look prehistoric, don't they? In the way they fly and that kind of design. So nice. You saw them gigging frogs.
Do you know what frog gigging is, Daniela? This is where the cross-cultural thing is, and I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't guess. Why don't you tell me?
It's hunting. It's just you're now obviously when we're out there I've never been frog gigging. I've never had any. It's never had any appeal to me. It's basically you have like a 3-pronged spear, right? And you have a little light, and what happens is you sort of shine light at the frog. The frog just kind of freezes because it's sort of hypnotized, and you stab it, and that's how you collect the frogs for frog legs.
Oh,
sir, you asked.
Well, look, we all have to know certain things so we can learn and understand different cultures and life everywhere.
Do they not just grow legs on their own? Is that not how frogs' legs?
No.
Same design as fish fingers and chicken McNuggets. No.
No. So again, the interesting story there is actually has a connection to mine, which is the pterodactyl or pterosaur. Sorry, pterodactyls are very specific. They're the ones with the crest and the things you saw in the Flintstones. I saw a rhamphorhynchoid. The pterosaurs that I saw, I thought was a blue heron originally, because of how I just thought it was the biggest blue heron I had ever seen, until it got 5 feet from my face. That's when I was like, oh yeah, that's not a bird. But and that's the thing, right? Is that everyone I've ever spoken to who has seen one of these creatures, like their first thought was, I thought I was looking at the really large heron or a crane or a pelican. Then I got a better look at it, and I realized that it was this thing, which is why I'm of the opinion that I think a lot of these creatures are absolutely seen, maybe a lot more than we realize. But people just say, "Oh, it's
mistaken."
Or they see it. They just see it. They see it on the side, like, "Oh, it's a big heron," and they don't care enough to even take that second look. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case.
Also, something in the sky with nothing to put it against.
Mm-hmm.
You've no idea, have you? You can only guess. So it's interesting. Lizard man. What we're talking about lizard man for? You've got a lizard man.
Yes.
I know you were great.
Daniela, Godzilla is lizard man. This is my lizard man.
I called it lizard man. I didn't know it was Godzilla. I've lost my street cred, and all of it, all in one night. I think I said something else as well, which was like, oh no, she didn't say that, did she?
Yeah.
So, it is what it is.
So why the fascination with Godzilla? I couldn't resist.
How can you not love Godzilla, man? So I saw as a kid, I grew up seeing the Godzilla, because again, I'm still old enough to remember a time when you had to switch between the UHF and the VHF, right? And that you actually had you had your major, you had your NBC, ABC, CBS. Then everything else was basically just syndicated, independent stations. I'm old enough to remember the freaking Dallas Wrestle Arena, whose name is, I'm just terrible with names right now, but the Wrestletorium and like the Von Erichs, right?
Kerry Von Erich, yeah.
Yeah, they were the local heroes. So, I mean, I remember all of that. Well, Channel 27 was like the last of the independent stations, and they would on Saturday nights have they would just run all the great Godzilla movies, right? So that's what I was watching when I was supposed to be asleep. And so, I grew up I loved Godzilla. I've just, how can you not love Godzilla? So,
well, I had to ask.
Sportatorium, thank you, Blue Line Bigfoot. Sportatorium, yes. Man, I you know what I miss more than anything else? I miss, there was it's still there, but it's been owned by a bunch of different people for a while. But it was a comic book store called Duncanville Books and Gifts. And when I walked in there, it was just it was a comic book store, and it was a used bookstore, and so everything smelled like newsprint and cigarettes. Because the dude was the guy who originally owned it, Jerry and Pam. He worked for, I know he worked for Frito-Lay at one point, but he actually worked for one of the aircraft companies in the area. And he'd made his money, and he retired, and he created his comic book store. And he just smoked, and he was he had survived crack out as a kid. And so he just sitting there smelling just that smell. You can't even smell, everything's so clean now, right? But it was old newsprint and cigarettes, and it was just the greatest smell ever. And nowadays you walk into something, everything's so sanitized, and if there's a smell, it's this artificial vanilla or pumpkin or whatever scent they put out there. It's not real. It's entirely artificial. But walking into a building that smells like life, really, right? That's what I miss. I miss sort of the old, the old school stuff where you could smell the wood, and you could smell the sweat. You could smell the life actually happening versus it being so clean and sanitary that it's like, here's the illusion of reality. All right, that's me being poetic for the day.
Well, from now on, everything's going to be anti-bac, isn't it, for the corona thing? So it's just going to come. Everything that was there before it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going back to your old kind of cartoony kind of things. What about the first horror film you saw? How young were you? I saw The Exorcist when I was about 10, I think. The original Exorcist.
I have never seen The Exorcist. I have managed to avoid it. Okay, so Mogollon, let's let our guest ask. Mogollon, what is your first horror film?
I'm not sure. I remember, all the Dracula films and the werewolf films, the Wolfman.
Mm-hmm.
I remember for some reason I was like 11 or 12, and I was over at a friend's house, and we were watching this movie called Gargoyles. And we were so into this movie, and his mother saw what we were watching and ran into the room and just yelled. And I mean, it's like ever since that moment, I hated that movie.
Okay, it occurs to me that I think my first one. Let me rephrase this: the earliest memory I have of a true horror movie, because I loved all the old Universal monsters, right? I love those. I think the first true horror movie was Poltergeist, the original, maybe one or two, whichever one where he drinks the worm. So it's either one or two. But yeah, that's probably the earliest one the earliest horror movie. I saw The Predator when I was way too young, but I don't even really consider that a horror movie. It's more
no. The Thing, yes, Chris Jarvis.
Yes.
More an alien thing, but wasn't that the first film that had kind of special effects, real specials or CGI or something like that. I think that was the first film to do something like that. I think so.
It was one of the first truly, well, it was one of the first ones to really introduce body horror as sort of a thing. It wasn't the special effects itself, but it was the idea of it being body horror. That's really where that sort of all comes from, is what was happening there. I want to say, I'll have to look this. I want to say it was actually Michael Westmore who did the special effects on that one. We'll look that up later. I may be wrong, but I think Michael Westmore like that really propelled him, because Michael Westmore did a lot of amazing work, particularly with like a Star Trek. Like that was a lot of his work. In fact, I may be wrong or right, but I think he actually helped design the original Iron Man suit for that first Iron Man movie, or at least it was his company that did. Yeah, no. So the thing, John Carpenter's Thing, is a remake of an earlier 1955 movie called The Thing.
Oh, right. Okay.
It was. What's interesting is in that one, I remember seeing that one too. My dad loved the old, like Forbidden Planet and all of that. It was a plant. It was like this walking plant creature in the original one, and so John Carpenter really absolutely amped that one up to 11 with Kurt Russell and all that. Man, yeah, that movie is hardcore. And
there were some good gore and effects in that one.
It was. Lady in the Woods, hers was The Blob.
Yes.
I don't remember that.
Really?
Well, it might have been out, but maybe I don't know.
Well, she's probably talking about the original 1950s version, which is well before you were born. It's worth watching. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Lindsay Bay. Hi, Lindsay. Mark of the Devil. I've heard of that, but I don't think I can remember.
Never
saw. Doesn't sound familiar.
Hi, Colette. Psycho.
Yes. You know,
it's more of a psychological thriller, though, rather than horror.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of hard to argue to say where some of I just forgot. Man, I can't remember anybody's name today. Alfred Hitchcock. It's kind of hard to say where Alfred Hitchcock movies land. Like, are they truly horror movies, or are they just psychological thrillers? Because most of his stuff, the reason it's so good and lasts is because it is really messing with your brain. It's the stuff that you don't see that scares you. So yeah.
Oh, Cujo was another one.
Cujo, yeah, Stephen King. Mid-South Squatch, how you doing? First, I wrote The Howling. I remember reading The Howling because I liked to read a lot when I was younger. But, sort of that era, without saying too much. Long time ago.
Didn't that have a few sequels to that?
Possibly.
The Howling?
Possibly.
Yeah, I think it did. Yeah.
I think they ended up being like marsupial werewolves.
Yeah.
At the end of one of those.
Yes. Or yeah, you're right.
And the Tasmanian tiger or whatever, the one had stripes, and I remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Tighten up, saying there's no CGI in it. It's not CGI, but it was the first. I'm going to look it up now.
Look it up. I want to say it's Michael Westmore worked on that. It was sort of his big first movie.
He's read all four, so yeah, The Howling. 4 of them. Salem's Lot. I loved Salem's Lot, actually. That was interesting. I'm gonna have a look.
Mike.
What am I looking up? Oh, I'm looking up. Yeah, I remember.
I'm sorry. I'm just over here reading some of the comments. Yeah,
Okay.
Legend of Boggy Creek, of course, is a famous one, and that's who we should talk to is Mrs. Pierce, the director's daughter. She's gotten everything. She's got it redone in HD and all that, and it's coming out on Blu-ray, so you can watch it sort of properly restored. The original Fly. Okay, so I see the Fly was mentioned. Here's the question: the original Fly or the one with Jeff Goldblum?
Oh, I don't know the original. I've seen the one with Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
The original one was good too.
Oh yeah, the original. Don't eat me. That was awesome.
Paul Holland pointed out that the original Thing in 1951, James Arness was the Thing. Now, if you guys don't know James Arness, he played Marshall Dillon.
Mm-hmm.
Just interesting fact. Thanks, Paul.
Yep. No, I grew up with I was at my grandmother's house on my mother's side every Sunday. Man, I was raised on, again, Channel 39, which is now a Spanish-speaking station. It was all day, just pure,
Westerns,
Western cowboy stuff, Lone Ranger, Marshall Dillon, all of it. Just Wild Wild West. The Wild Wild West never made sense to me because it's like it's like they took the Batman 60 show, which is made at the same time, right? And they made it a Western, and I'm like, this is just so bizarre. But I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved it, but it just never really made sense to me. So I'm like, I always think of Westerns as Marshall Dillon, Lone Ranger, your traditional stuff. The Rifleman.
Awesome shows, all awesome shows.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know most of them, probably because, I mean, I know some of them, but obviously we'll have had a different kind of shows back then when that sort of stuff was out. We had just kind of like the big Waltons, Little House on the Prairie, Dallas and Knots Landing. That was the only things that we got from America.
Really?
Yeah, there wasn't much American stuff on the telly. It was kind of limited to, just JR with his big hat. And Bobby suddenly, being in the shower again. So he followed it. It was just back then, wasn't it, when we used to watch that thing? Got a question for you. Mogollon Monster, have you ever watched The Prisoner?
I just saw that question. I don't recall. I mean, I might have. I don't recall who was in it or the storyline, but it sounds familiar.
It's a show I'm aware of. Yeah, I've never actually seen it, but it's basically about a guy in a city. I forget the details why he was there, but he would, if he tried to leave, like some weird bubble would come and pick him and drop him back off. Like he was just this prisoner in this town. I want to say it was in black and white. It was out about the same time as The Saint, if you remember that one. And by the way, I see someone mentioned Doctor Who. I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. Not even kidding.
I haven't watched that in a while, but that's a great show.
Never have guessed that. It's like now. Who Blue Line Bigfoot said Faulty Towers. Have you seen that?
Yes. That? Dude, okay, so every Friday night, again, growing up, we had Channel 13 is the PBS station here. They would just play. So my mom loved like the old Agatha Christie stuff and the Hercule Poirot. So we got that in the week, and then on the weekends we got on PBS we got like all the sci-fi stuff, but we got the comedies too. Are You Being Served? Faulty Towers, all of the Mr. Beans, Red Dwarf was a favorite of mine, and then from Canada we got the Red Green Show. So
that was an awesome show.
If the women don't find you handsome, they should at least find you handy. But it was Faulty Towers was brilliant. Again, I think though I'm a bigger fan of Are You Being Served? Of course, Monty Python is just in its own class.
Yeah, in its own kind of pigeonhole, isn't it? That and kind of Blackadder. I love Blackadder.
Yes.
that is quite quirky.
Yeah. Hugh Laurie was in that. It's like it wasn't until I went back and I was like, holy cow, Hugh Laurie was one of the characters.
Yeah. He was a prince, wasn't he? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. It really is. What else have we got? Anybody else? It's all bringing back memories for some people, all this stuff. Benny Hill was one of them.
Jeez. I used to get in trouble for watching that when I was a kid.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Benny Hill and Blackadder both got me into trouble every once in a while. So once that television moved into my room, it was much, much better. But yeah.
There was a time, wasn't there, back then? There was a time when adult sort of telly started, and it was time for bed for the kids, and there's always that crossover if you wanted to watch the Young Ones. That was funny. Maybe you might have not got that with Rick Mayall and what's his name? I can't think of it. But Carrie. Carrie was probably my favorite.
Oh, horror movie?
Hi, Zach. Yeah. I watched that like 100 million times with my best friend as a kid. We always used to do it. Her mum and dad would go to the pub at the weekend. we get some videos, some crisps and stuff like that, or chips, whatever you call it. And we'd get the Breakfast Club and Carrie. We'd watch it every single weekend for like 3 years or something like that. We knew all the words. It's just, what you do. Yeah, Kenny Everett, he was funny, a little bit controversial, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Moggs, what else are you into?
Yeah.
As far as
anything. What are you fascinated about?
Well, I'm kind of fascinated with Bigfoot. Never seen one, but that's really had my attention for the past 2 years. But my only experiences have been paranormal. So I figured if I believe in that, I might as well believe in, something that I believe to be flesh and blood. So, I have a new roommate that I've known for 10 years, and he just moved in, and I didn't know that he was a Squatcher. So I just found that out. So now I'll have somebody to go with and do a little research with, because I like being out in the field. I like, as far as filming out, on location is really fun. Plus I fish, and I'm always outside.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like to fish for out in Arizona?
There's a state park in town that there's catfish in it. There's some big bass in it, largemouth bass. They stock it with trout during the season. There's a lot of different places to fish out here. Usually when I go on vacation, it's a camping trip / fishing trip. We've done some pretty cool trips, my dad and I. If you get a chance, look up Lee's Ferry or Horseshoe Bend on the Colorado River. You always see the pictures from above. Well, if you're if you're looking at the pictures from above and you look straight down the opposite shore, we camped there.
Oh, really?
Right on the bend. Yeah. We took the boat up, we stopped, loaded up the boat and went 9 miles upstream and up the river and camped right there. So, everybody's taking pictures of the bend, and we're in some of them, I'm sure.
Awesome. Yep.
I'm just going to put your channel in the link. Mm-hmm. Everyone gone. If you haven't, they probably already have, haven't they? Because we know everybody now.
And this has become my new hobby. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing with this. 2 years ago, somebody told me I'd be doing this, I would have told them they were crazy. But I'm really having a good time, and it seems to be working out. People are receptive, and I'm glad, and getting some good stories out there. I have actually tomorrow I'm going to interview someone it'll be the first woman that I've interviewed yet. And I'm looking forward to that. The feminine perspective of her experience,
Sounds interesting. Cause I don't know, but I think women have different experiences to men.
Yeah.
Is that something you found or heard? Or?
I haven't talked to her yet. Briefly, and it's more paranormal. And she even mentioned demonic. Haven't talked that much, so I don't know the details, but I'll find out tomorrow. I just think it's, perspective, be it male or female. If something's scary, it's scary to both, I believe. Just some people handle it differently.
Yeah. In terms of maybe how Bigfoot reacts, the other way.
I think that that's a good question. I think they're more, or they may tend to be more, what's the word? Less aggressive towards a female, I believe. I could be way off. This is just my thought.
If anyone's heard that Sasquatch Chronicles 515, the English woman in California, I think.
That's an amazing story.
And he was aggressive actually, but the female stopped him.
Yeah. Oh, that thing was going to kill her.
Yeah, I think so. But that account, I'll never forget that one. Just for the amount of detail and how articulate.
And the terror in her voice telling it, after all that time. That's an incredible story.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I've noticed is I do think there's one of the bigger differences is that men tend to see Bigfoot either when they're out hunting, right, where they're in their things, or again crossing the road, something like that. Like we're out there, but a lot of female accounts and children, they tend to be the Bigfoot's coming to them
on the property.
Right? Yeah, they're coming on the property. They're investigating, and what that's about, I don't know. I mean, I got a story from actually here just outside of Corsicana, where there was clearly activity there was two different properties. The first set, they didn't know about Bigfoot at all, right? But once I started talking to them, they were like, oh yeah, well, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. I'm like, yeah, you've clearly got some kind of truth, because there was a creek right behind their house, right? But then when the guy looked at me and said, hey, we've been seeing this thing over near my sister-in-law's house. Anytime, apparently her husband works in the city, he'd be gone for a while, for like a couple days at a time, and then he'd come back. Well, anytime she was there by herself, a creature, she would talk about seeing this thing, this walking around the property and checking in. Well, one day they actually drove up on it, and they said they couldn't see it directly, but they saw the eye shine, and there was like 8 feet above the ground. And they said this thing comes around every time her husband's away.
Yeah, and chances are it's a male.
Right. And it's like, so, I mean, it does seem like their difference is men seem to come upon them, but they seem to go to women. I don't know what that's about. Again, women and children. I haven't even necessarily speculated on it. Like I said, maybe they're just not threatened by them and they're just curious, or what the heck's going on.
Attracted to them.
Maybe.
You never know.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I can't see them being threatened by a man. They don't seem to be, do they? They don't, even with men with guns. They seem to be able to overpower them in some way, whatever that is. Maybe it's just the reaction of the person. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And we'll never know, will we, exactly what's going on, or why.
Never say never.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. I hope we do. I hope we do. Yeah, there's a lot. Sabine River here. I've been hearing a lot about that recently. Cole, we'll have to get Cole on. Cole,
that's also where Mike Kirkpatrick had his experience.
Yeah, that's
in Louisiana.
And Jeff Stewart, yeah.
And the Squatching Cowboys down there doing a bit of Joe Pass has been doing a bit of research down there. So yeah, this a hot spot for sightings. Have you heard anything about Dogman recently, Russ?
No, the only really Dogman shows I listen to are like Vic Condiff, and there's something else, Dogman Encounters, or I think that's the other one. But I don't hear too much, encounters.
I've not heard anything recently, actually. They're few and far between, aren't they? The Dogman reports, I think. I mean, I know Vic gets them in. I don't know whether he's got a big build-up of them or what, but there's certainly more. There's something about Dogman that's not as friendly as Bigfoot for some reason.
Well, Vic Condiff is convinced that they're not going to hurt you. They're just going to scare the hell out of you, and they do it on purpose.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was actually really interesting because he mentioned that on our show with Tex. Yeah. He's just straight up said, hey, these things clearly are in situations to just eat people, right? They could easily kill people if they wanted, but they don't. They seem to avoid actual contact, and they're there just to create these, essentially create trauma, right? To terrify people, which creates this traumatic event. I kind of agree with him. I mean, that's that's actually been one of my big problems with Dogman in general, outside of how does this thing exist in particular, but it's like, they're clearly apex predators, right? At least with Bigfoot, you can see them being, if not straight up human enough to say, okay, if as long as we don't go around killing people, they'll probably leave us alone. Let's do that. Dogmen, on the other hand, doesn't seem to be quite that. You wouldn't expect them to have that sort of mentality, and yet they are clearly going out of their way not to harm people, and it doesn't make sense unless there's something else going on, which is kind of what we talked about last week, Daniela, right? With the idea of why are traumatic experiences sort of like feeding certain creatures. And I think, and again, I'm thinking maybe there's something else going on. Maybe human emotions are more powerful than we realize, or maybe it's not really about power in the idea that we think of as gasoline, but about legal authority. Maybe these creatures have creating trauma and terror and fear in people gives either them or something else access, and that's what they're really striving for.
Well, why do we why do we put fear into people? It's to control, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It generally creates some control. So maybe it could just be very simple that, like my dog with her puppies, just has to nip them or one slight bark, and they're put in the place,
Mm-hmm.
and she feels like, and maybe that's kind of what they do to us, to people who ever experience them, to maybe just a technique that I just saw something fly up.
Yeah, I saw that too. I thought it looked like a vapor for a second.
It went up, yeah, and I've got nothing burning. I've got something behind it. It went that way, didn't it? That was weird.
Missed it.
No, I saw it. I thought, maybe she's over there smoking, and I haven't seen her.
No, they've got a candle behind me, but it was over here, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There. I have to go back and look at that. If anyone saw that.
Do a
timestamp.
Yeah.
Could have just been a fly. I don't know.
Well, we can go back to 51 minutes and we can check it, or 50 minutes and we can check it out.
Yeah, I'll write it down and I don't forget. I'm watching the whole thing. So I forgot where I was.
Fairy at 50 minutes.
Yeah, I'll put that down. What part of Arizona are you? That's from Robert Hancock.
I'm in Cottonwood. I'm about 15 miles southwest of Sedona. Red Rock country.
Mm-hmm.
Red Rock. Why is that? Loads of red rock?
Oh yeah, look it up. It's gorgeous. I mean, if it's it looks like if you ever heard of Moab, Utah, or there are other red rock areas, but this is like a bucket list destination. It's one of those must-see places.
Yeah.
Very spiritual, very new agey. Supposedly there's portals and vortexes, and it's a little freaky town.
I'm a huge fan of the Enchanted Desert out there. I'm, the Painted Desert area. I love it.
Yeah, it's gorgeous out here.
That's where I'm headed. Yep.
Just seeing what's going on in the chat. Don't you hear about UFO stuff over there a lot over Arizona?
Yeah, my father witnessed in a UFO in 1993. Twice in 1 week, came over the mountain and over his house. The second time, I don't know if it was the Air Force or whoever chased it off. And there were other witnesses to that. A friend of mine just a couple months ago had an experience sitting at her dinner table. They looked out the window and there was something over the mountain. A cylinder shaped that, came in on its side. When it got to the mountain, it stood straight up. So it was like, straight up and down, and it turned and it was like pearlescent. And they ran outside because it started to go away, and they thought it was gone, and they went back inside. They looked out the window again, and it came back 20 minutes later and then went off again. But yeah, that was, there's a lot of incidents out there.
You kind of wonder, don't you, if I mean, obviously we think they are aliens connected to UFOs. Where are they landing? They never, or when they're coming to visit people, or what is that? How is that transition from ship to Earth? Because no one ever sees a UFO just landed down the street. while it's coming to, or in the field while it's mutilating some sheep or whatever. So that's interesting, isn't it?
There's also reports of DUMBs, the deep underground military bases. There's supposed to be one out there in Secret Canyon.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, that's the name. It's not a secret. But yeah, there's a lot of land out there, and there are places that you can and can't go that are fenced off, government owned. So
yeah. Let me just see if someone said here.
Sorry, I was just double checking one thing because it's like that whole area, right? New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, that sort of that very desertous strip. Like, you know, Mogollon was mentioning there's a lot of sort of vortexes out there. It's a very paranormal location. Skinwalker Ranch is in Utah, right? I mean, that's we tend to think it's like, oh, it's this state or this state. It's like you got to really remember that whole area it's broken up over 3 states, but that's still one contiguous thing, right? Our state lines are completely arbitrary on that. So I think the fact that we can't really just remove the fact that we have Skinwalker Ranch, the Red Rock area, we've got Roswell, we have all the sightings out there, and of course that's where we blew up all of our atomic weapons when we were testing. And it's like all of that's happening in one area. And I mean, it's a big area, but still. Like that can't be ignored, right? I mean, the Four Corners region is, as Jamie and I came to the same conclusion. The Four Corners region is completely, it's nuts. That whole region, and there's a lot of stuff out there. It makes you wonder what it is again, why it's out there, and like you said, maybe it's deep underground bases. Who knows?
Well, the friend that with the Thunderbird sighting or whatever it was, she lives within 100 miles of Skinwalker Ranch.
Well, there you go.
Coincidence?
Yeah, precisely. I mean, at this point, it makes you, like you said, Danielle, it's like, where are UFOs when we're not looking at them? I do think the USO thing theory, where it's like maybe these things aren't necessarily coming from other planets, but rather maybe they are they're actually underwater. Maybe the UFOs are some of the USOs in the air. I think that's worth investigating. I think that we may need to have that mentality. Maybe they're not necessarily coming from out there in so much as they're already here and they're just they're underwater, right? Because I mean, there's
been so many reports of USOs.
Yeah, and UFOs coming, literally leaving the water, and then others going back in. Yeah, we can't really ignore that, and plus, it makes a lot more sense. Like, space is big, and it's empty, and so it's really hard to not be seen, right? But underwater, it's a completely different thing. You can be next to something. You can be 20 feet away from something and never see it, because the water is so thick with, depending on where you are, sometimes the water's clear, sometimes the water's just so murky you can't see anything. That's a perfect place to hide. It's almost harder to get there and to really investigate than it is just to look, take a telescope and look up in the sky. So, I mean, even if you're of the opinion that they are from another planet, I'm not, but if you do, then that's a better place to hide anyway, right?
I'm still thinking, though. I mean, how do they get into people's bedrooms at night? This is the other thing. They're all they're parking down the road in the Red Rock in Arizona, but then what they're doing, hitching a ride into town to do what they do to people. There must be another, or maybe they can freeze time like they're doing what people seem to think. They can block people's memories, this time loss and stuff. Maybe they're around us and we're not even aware of it because we're in some sort of trance. I don't know. But
there have been several cases where numerous people have seen a UFO over a building, right? Or I forget the name of it. It was in the 60s or 70s where several people saw an orb take a woman out of her apartment and they took it up to something. And I mean, so people do see them land, they do see them, but you're right. You'd imagine with all the abduction experiences, that we'd see them a lot more often than we don't. Personally, I'm of the opinion that a lot of these, again, I'm going to be very precise with my language here. I'm not saying that these are, well, I believe these no.
Hang on, let me just get it up just as a reminder.
There you go. Yeah. No, just to be very precise, though. I think a lot of what we consider to be what are called UFO abductions are not necessarily as physical as we think they are. I think a lot of people, not all of them, but I think a lot of people are actually staying in their rooms. I'm not saying they're hallucinating. I'm not saying that they aren't even necessarily being abducted, but what I'm thinking is that there's a lot of mental manipulation that's occurring. I think that there may be beings that are coming into people's homes, right, that look more human. They're doing the things they need to do to the body, but the spirit or the mind is actually somewhere else. I think a lot of these encounters are the memories that people are picking up are entirely psychic in nature. They are not physical, but that doesn't mean there isn't a physical version. We have the story of the gentleman from Australia, right, who fell asleep but woke up and there were these two naked chicks on his bed, but he said they looked weird, and he heard them say in his head, "Hey, something's wrong. He's awake." And he tries to fight back, and they touch him on the forehead, and basically he goes down. But they did find, keep it very PG here, a hair that was not his on a body part that was associated with this encounter. And they tested it, and they said it was human DNA, but the DNA was connected to this very remote tribe that was in the middle of China, right? It had nothing to do. It was a very bizarre experience, but it's interesting that it's like, well, hold on. So then, what's going on here? Like it really calls a lot of these things into question. The fact that we have 400 accounts of people again using the name of Jesus, and the whole thing ends, right? Like, I know ufologists hate talking about that aspect of it, but it does occur. So if something can instantaneously end and you're back in your bed, then maybe you never left your bed to begin with. So I think I think the problem is this question is much more layered and nuanced than people realize. And so I question how often people are even actually being physically abducted, right? Maybe maybe a lot of this is actually more spiritual in nature or psychic in nature than physical in nature.
It's all in their head.
Right. Well, it's in their spirit. I think. Yeah. Another, for all intents and purposes, which doesn't mean it isn't happening. It just means that there isn't a little green man actually probing. You. On a spaceship somewhere. Maybe there is something though happening to your body, but it's not what you think is happening. And so maybe these creatures are not actually. Maybe you're not being abducted by being levitated through a ceiling. Maybe they're just walking into your home, doing what they need to do while your spirit or mind is somewhere else, your consciousness is somewhere else, and then they leave out the front door, but they look like humans.
It's quite possible.
It's also more terrifying, honestly.
Yeah.
Like almost to a point, it's like, well, they're from another planet. They have this advantage, but what if they're just walking in through the front door and no one recognizes them? Like, that's a much more terrifying thought. Like, okay, back to Doctor Who for 2 seconds. One of the seasons had Matt Smith in it, right? They had the big-headed aliens that looked like they were wearing suits, and they had literally taken over the planet for years. But anytime you stopped looking at them, you forgot they existed. You could only remember them if you were looking at them. And so they would just be places, and they would tell you things, and then of course you turn around and you'd completely forget anything had happened, but they could put like a nugget or a kernel or a thought in your head. It's something like that is much more terrifying than maybe some all-powerful alien with this massive spaceship. What if there's just a race of things running around? Again, maybe we call them demons, maybe there's something else, maybe it's all intertwined, but can mess with your head. And that's what's actually happening. I think that's almost much more terrifying.
There's a good possibility to it. And yeah, it's more intrusive,
Because they can.
Or again, maybe they have an agenda. My personal thought is I think that there is an agenda to it that ties into to a bunch of things. But again, but then it becomes whose agenda, right? And who's to say they're not working with the government, right? I mean, we've all heard this, the story that MUFON has out there that because Dwight Eisenhower absolutely went missing for like 3 days, and on the same 3 days, there was an Air Force base out in California that was completely abandoned. They said they had some sort of a chemical spill. Everyone had to leave. And that's those same 3-day period, he was gone. Like no one could find him. His aides didn't know where he was. His secretaries didn't know where he was. And he comes back. In fact, there were news reporters who were getting ready to run stories, right, saying that he had died because no one knew where he was. And then he shows up and he said he had to have some sort of emergency dental surgery. It's like, but what are you doing out in California? Why did you have to go to California to get this surgery done? Why didn't anybody know you were having it? But it supposedly coincides with the same event that we know happened about the Air Force Base. And the claim is that he met and made a contract with these aliens. That they came down, that there was footage of them coming down, and that he negotiated things. They would exchange information and technology, but in return, they get access to us as human beings. Now, it's crazy. It sounds insane, and I think Nick Redford, I believe he's on the record as saying that he's like that whole story makes no sense to him, because if they really are these beings of this immense power and all the things they're supposed to be, why would they even bother, right, doing that? But to me, if these aren't they aren't what we think they are, if they're not actually extraterrestrials, if they're maybe something more demonic in nature, then I think that makes a lot more sense than anything else. I think it makes perfect sense that they would be making this kind of a deal because as the president of the United States, he would have a supernatural authority to actually make that deal, and that would be lasting. Would actually give them access to people. So I think that story's always seemed rather odd to me, but it makes a lot more sense from a supernatural perspective than it does maybe a physical perspective. Just thought.
Yeah, it's a good thought.
I remember the story of him making the deal or having, something along those lines back in the day.
Mm-hmm. And I think there was I think his granddaughter even is the one, or great granddaughter was supposedly investigating that whole situation and came out. She said she believed it was real. So I mean, that's one of those things where you're like, okay, when people's relatives start getting involved, saying, "Yeah, we think this is a real thing," okay, you got to at least pay attention to it, at least, and at least put it up there. You can't just wipe it away.
No, that's the thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
There's just too much to do that. I'm just going to, I don't know what this is. Zach's posting this. Randonauting app. Has anyone heard of that?
Hold on. I'm going to look that up. Leave it up there because I can't spell that on my own.
RANDON.
I have no,
It's a shameless plug. No.
Yeah, exactly. It's a shameless plug.
How do you talk about it if you don't know what it is?
Oh, Zach. Is that what you're doing? No, I think it'll be interesting.
Just kidding, Zach.
I'm going to put a link up to Zach's channel. So,
what the heck?
He's saying he wants to know more about this because
no one can
this app. It really finds the energy or something like that. How they find these evil things. Oh, maybe everyone's going to have to go over to Zach's channel in an hour. And then is the Paranormal Portal on tonight? Are they? Yeah.
Today is Sunday. Yeah, 1 hour show.
1 hour show in 2 hours time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why is it leading people to dead bodies? Okay. This is weird.
Okay.
Like even on my thing, this is weird.
Right. Maybe we should talk about it next week.
Yeah, I'll need to look into this.
Yeah.
Because it's a TikTok app in there, or it's a thing. Apparently, people on TikTok, it's leading teens to dead bodies, and it says something about quantum something. Okay, we'll have to look that up. That's weird.
Yeah.
All right. Well, something to look into. Yay.
Or go over to Zach's channel in an hour and have a listen and see what people are saying. So thanks, everybody. I'm sorry if I've missed some of your questions. No, Carl, all of those words you said were bad. And it's done. The money's in the account. There's no refunds.
Check is in the mail.
My favorite non-swear word it was, I forget who it said. It was like, hey, that's just another King James version or King James donkey. Because in the original King James, they use the proper, which is ass, versus donkey, which is in the more modern version, so as not to offend American sensibilities. So
the word you just said.
It is a donkey. It is. I'm not claiming that one.
You're right. You're absolutely right. No, it's fine.
It's an appropriate word. I'll give you the other one only because it has other connotations. But no, I'm not going down on because of that. Nope.
That word. Okay. Well done. Well
done.
It
is clearly pointed out that in the context it was referring to an animal.
Well, according to Lindsay Bay, Brent takes Sunday to Tuesday off. I just thought he took Monday and Tuesday off. So.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, well.
It's news to me.
Yeah. Guys, thank you very much. Jason and Mogollon Monster. It's been a pleasure having you on.
My pleasure.
Hey, pleasure's always mine.
We'll be here next Sunday, me and you, Jason, won't we? With another riveting show of wealth of knowledge about all sorts.
I love the fact. I love how you said riveting. There was such an implication there. It's like I don't know how to take that one. I'm both hurt and yet intrigued.
It's a compliment. It's a compliment. Take it as a compliment.
I will choose to accept that way. Mogs, always good to see you. I'll definitely see you all tomorrow on a Texas show. I forget who we have coming on, but yeah,
I'll be there.
Fun.
Well, I've got both your links in the description.
Thank you.
What the Fascination and not another Bible study. If you like Bible studies, go to not another Bible study because it's about Bible studies, and it's a lot of fun. And I'll be on the Researchers Report on Wednesday night, and then I'll be back here on Hidden Existence around the weekend with somebody interesting. So everyone have a good week, and good night, everyone.
Good night, guys.
Everybody.